Hello, Endeavor here. So I wanted to do a live stream for 500 subs, and I'm probably pretty much just going to answer your questions. I just want to start off by saying thank you to everyone that's subscribed so far. It's been a hell of a ride. It's really exciting to be part of these dissident right conversations online, and yeah, I'm looking forward to the future. I've got a lot. I've got a lot planned in the future, and stay tuned because there's a lot more coming. And I also wanted to start off by saying that my next video will be coming out in probably a few days. It's taking a little. It's going to be a little bigger than I thought it would, so I might end up splitting the video into two parts. But yeah, so it's gonna be a big one, and I might end up making two different parts to the video. I know I said it was gonna be a 3-part series, but I might end up making it a 4-part series. So yeah. Anyway, guys, any questions? Just about either my content, any of my views on certain things, perhaps my opinions on other people's contents, certain events in the world. Just post them in the chat. And yeah, so if there's anything you'd like to ask, just message in the chat, and I'll see what I can do. Okay, and I might be inviting a few other folks on later. So yeah, you know, it's been a interesting last few weeks in the whole YouTube sphere. I'm sure you guys have all heard about like Baked Alaska and how that guy completely like imploded, but we can maybe talk about that later. So okay, what will it take to unite the right? Good question. That's difficult to say. What I think needs to happen is people need to realize, first of all, that we that the current neoconservative movement in the right's a complete failure, and that the sooner that one dies, the better. The problem with it is that, I mean, like I've said in plenty of my videos, like the PragerU video, is that they're accepting all the left's premises to be true, and they really just come across as disingenuous. So really, what we first need to realize is that the left is fully in charge, and I think that to unite the right, we first well, we need to we need to find something that's really worth fighting for, and it can't be like my classical liberalism. It can't be individual rights. It needs to be they need to have an understanding of really what matters, really what's valuable to a civilization. Its traditions, its culture, and its people. And I think that's what the right really needs to stand for. And I think the unifying issue is going to be the demographic replacement. I think that's what's going to be the issue that pushes a unified right wing movement, I hope. Okay. Any future collaborations planned? Not at the moment, but I'm looking into it. I'd like to maybe debate a few people. I'm thinking about maybe challenging some of the liberalists because I mean I've talked about them quite a bit. I challenged Three Arrows, but he declined, unfortunately. But I'll try again. Yeah, so I'm looking into it. I would definitely like a lot more people on this channel. And yeah, I would like to reach out to more reactionary channels and get build some more connections in that way. Was I blue pilled? Were you a blue pilled boomer before a reactionary? Kind of. I was. I mean, I'd say that when I was 18, 19, I was kind of really just a normie conservative, but I was really kind of dissatisfied with the way the world was going, and reactionary eventually, because because I kind of even knew back then that the conservative movement was a complete failure, and it really was before when I really discovered reactionary ideas that I thought, okay, well, this is really ideas that can effectively push back against progressivism, and I'd say that I wanted it before I knew it even existed. And I'd say, I think I've said in the past is that really what drove me to become a reactionary was it was just my love of history and realizing that the modern world could never provide me I could never really be part of anything I could be proud of in the modern world that many of the historical figures that I loved were part of. Is Discord better than Skype? 100% better. It's way better. Do I view blood sports as an asset to the dissident right? Um, Hard to say. Honestly, I think it's kind of detrimental at this point. I gotta say. I just don't think that the discourse is very productive, and I mean it's bad optics too. And I mean, hey, if I get invited on, I definitely go on. But um, it's difficult to say. I think that so far it's had a negative impact, in my opinion. My opinion's on Pat Buchanan. I like the guy. He's a paleocon, so I think he really understands that. I'd say that a lot more than most other conservatives. He understands a lot more of what's wrong with the West. I haven't done too much reading on him, but I like what I've heard from him. But I'll have to look into him more in the future. I will do that. Politics before culture or culture before politics? What needs to change first? Definitely culture. I think it was Andrew Breitbart that said culture is downstream from politics, meaning that, or might have been the other way around. But the point, the point is that culture pushes politics. So you have to understand that if the dissident right's ever going to have any effect, it needs to be a cultural movement first, because it will ever be able to make like a reactionary party and then just like walk into these elections and actually you know uh, be successful. We have to look at changing the culture before we can even think about policy. It needs to be a cultural movement, and that's really what we're focusing on. I think that politics, I mean, we're not even in that realm yet. We would need to come up as a single value. And okay, yeah, this is a response to my answer from earlier. Why did I choose the HMS Endeavor as the image for my channel? I chose it because I wanted to pick a historical figure, and James Cook is one of my favorite historical figures. I picked him because he's a pretty much a symbol that represents the British Empire. He's an important figure to Britain, to Canada, where I live. He's important to Australia, New Zealand, and I mean, yeah, he's just an amazing historical figure. And I mean, the kind of the message I wanted to have is like, be proud of your history, be proud of your culture, and don't apologize for it. And I thought that James Cook was a very good figure, because I know he's like controversial with progressives today, but it's like a very good figure for that. And I didn't want to call my channel like James Cook or Captain Cook because that just kind of didn't sound cool, But I thought Endeavor, that it sounds cool. It works as an emblem, and it I guess somewhat represents what I want to. I guess what I want, the messages that I want to portray. Yeah. Okay. More questions about the ship. Sorry, I'm just reading the chat right now. How do we encourage maturity in right-wing online movements, especially because many are so young? Great question. That's a very big problem because I think people like Baked Alaska is extremely immature, and that's why the guy really I mean he was never going to be a figure that the right could ever actually uh, have taken seriously. And I think the same thing with someone a lot of alt right figures like Richard Spencer is I think he's I always say that Richard Spencer's kind of the alt-right Tony Robbins. Like, I don't really see very that much value in the in the message he's giving off. But yeah, that's a really difficult question, because it's a movement that will attract a lot of, dispossessed young men like myself, I guess you could say. Um, and there's a lot of rage built up in these young men, so it is difficult. But I think that to encourage maturity, what we need to do is encourage self improvement, because that's what I've seen in the dissident right is a push for self improvement, and that's something that I'm very happy about. We need to encourage people to read, to exercise, to form relationships, really go out there and make themselves stronger men. Because the Western man he's become cucked, and if we're actually going to have a good movement, we need strong men, and we need we need good caring women, and we just need young people to really understand that they have a lot to lose, the way the world's going, and we really need to encourage them to improve themselves, because if you need to improve yourself if you're actually gonna be successful in if this movement is going to succeed. Because and trust me, this is easier said than done, because we can't just choose to opt out of modernity. um it's but yeah, I'd say you can encourage maturity by encouraging self improvement, and that's what we really need to do. um okay, so let's go on to some more questions. Be careful with too much red pilling. I don't want them to become too delusional of the modern world, and their eyes become clouded. Um, they will become annoying spurgs. Well, I mean, it depends what you mean by that. I mean, yeah, I guess that just goes back to the maturity question. Is that you can red pill the guys, but I mean, you have to also encourage them to develop, because they have a lot. Young folks have a lot to be angry about in the in the modern world, but you have to you have some way of controlling yourself, because you can't just lash out at it, because optics matter. Despite what anyone says, it really does matter how you present yourself. Okay, I'm just reading some more questions. Perhaps we could promote the idea of cyclical history process as opposed to a progressive one. Yes, I'd say that I would definitely agree with that. I've talked a bit in my last video about the idea of Whig history, which is it's a progressive idea that history is progressing towards a more liberal, more equal society. Cyclical history, rather, it's saying that civilizations go through these cycles of prosperity, decadence, degradation, depression, recovery. So and I guess at this point we're definitely in. I'd say either a decadence and then in the degradation part. So if when you look at it that way, yes, it bodes a lot better for our narrative than the progressive one. And actually, it's good that you bring this up, because I'm going to be talking about a lot of this in my upcoming videos. If you had to choose Aristotle or Plato, Aristotle, definitely. Uh, I mean, I think a lot of Plato. I find there are a lot of problems with him, is that he tries to change human nature too much. Aristotle, I think, was a lot more my cup of tea. Yeah, I'm actually rereading Plato's Republic right now, and it just reminded me that I do not like a lot of his ideas. Even though, I mean, there's some that I do, but I just like the way he wants to just restructure civilization to it's a lot of the same thing that progressives want to do, is they want to change uh man fundamentally, rather than actually accounting for his real nature. And I think that's a big problem. Okay. Do you feel religion will play a major part in this new movement? I certainly hope so. I think that a religious man is almost always more motivated than a secular man. I think a lot of the problems that we're facing right now came about uh, when religion, started to die off. So I certainly hope that it's going to be a religious movement. So I mean, I think Christianity just provides so many great so many great values, and it really directs people to the kind of lifestyle that we really need in any kind of counter progressive movement. So, but I do also acknowledge that I don't think it'll be an entirely religious movement, because I think that there's going to be there is just a lot of people in it that just don't believe. And I mean, you can't, I guess you can't pretend to have faith when you don't. So, I mean, there's a lot of ideas that, there's a lot of, different, ideologies that are kind of, at work here. So, but yes, I do think that Christianity definitely should be part of, any kind of, new movement. Okay. Who would win in a fight, Satan or the Whig force? What's the difference? Have you read Remy Barag? No, I haven't. I'm sorry. I think to get young right-wing men to mature is to offer challenges. One, the Golden One does this, and I think young men are challenged. Okay. I don't think that was a question. I don't know what the Golden One refers to. Sorry. Opinions on anime. Oh, of course. Most of it, especially the cutesy stuff, is trash, and the rest is good. What, in your opinion? Anime is degenerate. I don't watch it. I won't watch it. I don't see much value in it. Yeah, I'm not going to really spend that much time on anime. I mean, I liked Dragon Ball Z when I was young, but I mean, uh, it was a good show, but I don't really see it as a tool of value for us. So, have you read the Jacobite magazine? No, I haven't. I don't know what that is. A better question for PUBG. I don't know what that is either. Okay, so I guess the question earlier about people spurging out was referring to like the more radical, like members of any like right wing movement. So like the Andrew Anglin types, like or like Natsock types. Well, I think that's a real liability because, like, I mean, that's a real problem. That's because we can't have people that just lash out and are just in it to LARP as like some, I don't know, like not like Nazi LARPing, and all this bullshit just needs to go. It's I mean, because I mean, I don't say that I'm associated with people like that, but I understand that according to the mainstream media and like the cathedral, as the reactionaries would refer to it, I understand that they're probably going to try to conflate you with them, like for example, the Charlottesville rally. It doesn't matter if you say, well, I'm not like one of those one of the guys at Charlottesville, but the problem is that according to the media, if you're in the dissident right, you essentially are one of them in Charlottesville. So it for better or for worse, I mean, it affects any movement, even if even if someone you want nothing to do with, there's still a liability because uh, the progressive left will always try to associate you with it. But actually, another thing I could bring up though is that in a way that's it can kind of be helpful because they also associate people like, say, Sargon of Akkad, or even like Dave Rubin, or people that are not even, I mean, it's hard to even consider them right wing, but they get lumped into that too. So it's like, more and more people keep getting lumped into being, far right or alt right or whatever, that eventually it kind of just pushes them all into it kind of just pushes more and more people into your hands. Like, I mean, I remember I've seen a lot of progressive videos that they say that Sargon of Akkad is part of the alt right. I mean, he's been on Right Wing Watch several times, like, and he still thinks that he's not. He still thinks he's center left. So it's like, I have no clue. I mean, he has to realize that there's no space for him on the left. So I mean, one good thing of that is that the more radical progressives get, the more and more people they push into your hands. I mean, uh, I guess I wouldn't say that PewDiePie is like, he's certainly not dissident right, but he's kind of like incorporated a lot of like, anti SJW stuff, which for what it's worth is, I mean, he has a massive platform, so it is a good thing. And he was pushed there because of the mainstream media smear piece against him. But anyway, the the anti-anime right will doom the movement. Anime is the way to success. I doubt that. Got any good book recommendations for economics? Not really. I'm not great in economics. I mean, the basics ones. Wealth of Nations. I've read the Communist Manifesto. I've read, even though I don't agree with it, obviously, but it's good to actually know your enemy, I guess. Yeah, I don't have too many recommendations on that. Okay. Do you think we need a new renaissance, as in revival in the arts, interest in classical literature, etc.? Yes, that is exactly what we need, because uh, people will start to push back against globalism and progressivism, really the tearing down of Western culture. Once they really see what they have to lose. So having an appreciation for art, for literature, for architecture, for your history, these are the things that get people motivated to fight for them. Because you can't just endow a hatred for the modern world to get someone to actually be effective. I guess going back to what we were talking about earlier with people spurging out and um, I don't know, like Andrew Anglin types, or like Nat Sock types, like spurging out and just being complete idiots. Because I feel like someone like that, they have a hatred for the modern world, but they don't have a love for anything. I feel like classical literature, the arts, and all these like just traditional culture, having a love for that motivates someone much more, and that's what's going to really motivate someone to become a stronger person, improve themselves, and really go out there and fight for these things. No wing nats. Okay, don't know what that is. Okay. Opinion on gays. I believe in traditional marriage, so I'm against same-sex marriage. uh Have you watched Shibio Yaka, a YouTuber? I haven't. Thoughts on Kanye West? Uh, I don't listen to his music. I know he made a few comments a few days ago that I don't know. I mean, I guess they're interesting, but people like Paul Joseph Watson, like coming his pants over, that's completely ridiculous. I think Paul Joseph Watson's a complete moron, and I mean, he keeps like man, I swear to God, Paul Joseph Watson probably like, like, I don't know, he probably like begs Candace Owens every day to remind him how not racist he is. It's really quite pathetic. Because anyway, that's kind of beside the point. Thoughts on Kanye West? I don't really have any opinion on him. Don't listen to his music. I guess he's not as insufferable as other celebrities. Don't really know what to say. Wealth of Nations is plagiarized. Maybe. Haven't looked into it too much. Have you seen any of Gilbert and Sullivan's comedic operas? No, I haven't. How long until the Saxon learns to hate? That's a good poem, and I gotta say, I think he's learning. Anyway, Southerners are constantly shamed for their heritage. Should Southerners embrace their heritage anyway? Yes, they absolutely should, because you can't apologize for your history. Because once you apologize, you've delegitimized yourself, meaning that it gives the left the right to tear it down. Yeah, and what you need to eventually say is, I fine, bad things happened in the past. It's what made us who we are. I'm not going to apologize. I am proud of who I am as a person. Southerners need to say for themselves that they're proud of their culture, their land, and their heritage, and refuse to apologize for that. That's what they need to do. Because once you apologize to the left, they've got you. That's what gets them to delegitimize it. So that's what gets them to essentially tear down your heritage, is once you have apologized for it. So yes, Southerners should absolutely try to embrace their heritage, and as politically as incorrect as it may be, but be smart about it. So obviously don't go around saying like, oh, slavery was good, but be smart about it. But yes, there's a lot more to the South than slavery, and they have a long and unique history, and embrace it. Okay, have I heard of Therian Baudet? No. His slogan is, "It's time for a new renaissance." I agree with that. Okay. Shino Yaka makes some good content. Okay, actually, I think I know who that guy is. He made a video responding to Sean. Yeah, Sean's a fucking liar. I might actually need to make a response to that guy eventually. His videos are complete misrepresentations, and but anyway, So if anyone would like to join, I'll just send me a message on either Discord or Twitter. I'll start sending out the link if anyone would like to speak with me. Just give me 1 second. I'm just going to send a few people the link. So yeah, you can, if you'd like to come on and speak, just message me on either Discord or on Twitter, and yeah. Thoughts on Destiny? I haven't watched any of his content. I don't have any opinion. Sorry. Do we start the long march to take over the institutions, or do we create parallel institutions? That's actually an interesting question, because we talked a bit about this. We talked about this on my Mencius Molebug stream. What we talked about was that the conclusion we came to was that it's a better strategy to build parallel institutions, because they're not going to let you just come into their institutions and take it over. They remember themselves doing it, and they're not about to let us do it too. So, if you can get into these institutions, then definitely do it. But I think the focus should be on building parallel institutions. Thoughts on Ayn Rand? Ayn Rand's an idiot. Okay.
Yeah, I was asking that because I've noticed that she's always the person that people disillusioned leftists go to. But like the problem with her is like she views everything in an economic term and just completely, much like how the left views culture as just something that should be destroyed. She has kind of the same opinions on it.
Yeah, well, she's such a materialist.
I know that's why I don't think her movement will ever gain. That's why it never gains traction. I mean, people talk about like how she says selfishness is a virtue, which is already kind of stupid because most human beings tend to like social groups. So selfishness in that will never end up being considered a virtue as a result.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also think that like libertarianism. Well, okay. First of all, anarcho-communism is just complete stupidity. But I think even libertarianism, there's a lot of the problems with it is that it's born out of decadence because it's an idea that exists in a civilization that's already established. But and I'm going to be actually talking about this in my next videos. Is that it doesn't it's not a sustainable ideology. Like you can't have just a society with just as few rules as possible because it just degenerates and
I know. I think one great example is Styx. I cannot pronounce the last bit of his name. Styx Exenhammer, I think.
Yeah.
Like his entire mentality is just leave me alone and all that. It's like he just kind of. It's like a lot of them just kind of want to just sit. What's the term? Sit around and do nothing, basically.
Yeah. Well, it reminds
mentality of they went after my video games. Now I'm mad.
Yeah, that's a problem because
I mean, I enjoy a good video game, book, and all that stuff. But it's like, priorities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're all great, but you just gotta have your priorities straight.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of. So, have any of you ever heard essentially the fact that, that no democracy has ever had a period of starvation?
Right.
But really when you really analyze that fact, it's really kind of false because really it's just that democracies require a lot of wealth in order to persist. And that's the same thing with libertarianism, is that it requires a lot of wealth. But if ever there is some unforeseen event, if ever there is some chaotic event or some reduction in the economic value, then it's going to collapse. It's not going to survive itself.
Yes, exactly. And because the problem is that it's completely focused on having the most amount of freedom possible without actually sustaining a state. And this is actually I'm going to be talking about this a lot in my upcoming videos, but it's really an idea that's born on it doesn't have the right priorities in mind. It doesn't give a civilization what it needs to sustain itself. That's my opinion on it. So we got asked, what do we think about Nick Fuentes? I follow him on Twitter. I watched his debate with AIU.
Autism is unstoppable.
Yeah, I know. He pretty easily curb stomped AIU. I don't know. I like the guy. I haven't watched too much of his stuff. He did a good job taking out AIU.
Any idiot could take out AIU. AIU's only method of debate is to scream, "You're dumb," and hope that his sheep continue on. They basically just operate on a group repeating stuff like a cult.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There's a guy named Friended Forever. He made a very good series on anti-theism, and pretty much just how stupid it is. And he's an atheist himself. I really liked what he had said was that these atheist types are essentially it's like not collecting stamps, but having to tell everyone in your life that you don't collect stamps and how horrible collecting stamps is.
Right.
And that's like your main identity.
Well, it's a virtue signal.
Yeah.
Their identity is solely based around the hatred of one group. So like even if they somehow quote unquote won, even though like AIU's name is so hilarious because atheism is probably the easiest like identity to collapse. It only really pops up when in a heavily decadent society.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, just manifestly at a very practical level, atheism is demographically bad. So there's that.
Endeavor, may I point something out
Sure.
that you may have overlooked? In your video responding to 3 arrows, many leftists just comment on your video and they accused you of straw manning or misrepresenting his arguments, and I couldn't debate with them because there are too many complexities with them.
Well, I mean, Three Arrows himself was straw manning people's arguments. So like, I was trying to. I mean, hey, I invited him to a debate. If any of Three Arrows fans are watching, ask him to debate me. I'd be more than happy to. Because the thing is, with the Three Arrows video, what he essentially was doing was he hammers on a technicality, and he doesn't really address the real argument, because the point is that the left dominates the universities, and they are pushing culture through that, and he really just hammers away at the idea that the Frankfurt School was like in this room planning on how they're going to destroy Western civilization. Obviously, that's not true. However, it certainly is true that all these ideas are coming. A lot of ideas that are pushing society to the left come from the academy, and he tries to like outright deny that fact based on this very specific and very simplistic conspiracy theory.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the left at this point doesn't so much want to argue its opposition; it wants to disqualify them, right? It wants to point out some reason why they're not worthy to consider. That's why when you get people going after Aiden Paladin, so there was recently this week a big campaign against it. Was it Aiden Paladin or Aiden?
Aiden Paladin.
Aiden Paladin, right?
I don't know.
But there was a big push on several people from the progressive side of YouTube to try to get Aiden Paladin. But they didn't. I mean, this is a YouTube channel, and she's kind of a spunky content creator. But most of her content is her piling through pretty dry sociology and peppering it here and there with some snark so that it's at least a little bit entertaining. But there's some highly technical arguments here. But the main focus this was not just one person. This was like three people. This was like David Sherratt. What was it? That potato head guy? Is it? I forget what his name is.
Are you talking about Kevin Logan?
Kevin Logan, yeah. Kevin Logan, and there's another person. They all went after Aiden Paladin, but they didn't actually try to address her arguments. They just caught the fact that she had speculated something questionable about the Holocaust, and then they used that to insinuate that she was a Holocaust denier, and therefore she totally missed. So the left does not appear to actually want to engage with ideas, as far as we can figure out on YouTube.
Actually, I think Three Arrows was actually talking about the same thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, the general gist of how that whole thing went is, again, they gather up into a group and then just like try to shout down the opposition.
And it's all at once too, right? They all try to figure out some way to collectively discredit a popular channel.
I know, like when you see people like Sargon or Millennial Woes or anyone like at a public speaking event, have you ever seen when Antifa just bursts in and they just scream like a bunch of nuts?
Well, I mean, Antifa is under mob mentality.
Their only method of arguing is just trying to drown out and cause violence, which is why if I ever went to like one of those things, I'd probably just bring a gun just so I could shoot in the air and watch those people just...
okay, yeah.
Yeah, be careful here. You're about to disqualify
anyone. I wouldn't put anyone.
Yeah.
They would just freeze in fear. I've seen...
Okay, all right, man.
No, I'm not talking about actually causing harm.
This is a good point, because it's very important for reactionaries, conservatives, and traditionalists to give the left as little red meat as possible to disqualify you from the conversation. When they have to make a stretch to say something like you're disqualified because instead of saying 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust, you said 4 to 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust, that starts sounding a little bit strained, right?
Well, yeah, I talked about this a bit earlier. Is that you can't give them ammunition. So
no.
Just by like just screaming at the cathedral is not going to get you anything done. You have to understand that they're looking for people to label these evil, white supremacist, racist Nazis. They're looking for this. So
Right.
don't
As
give
a matter
them
of
like
fact, it does the
cartoon-
cathedral's work for it, right?
exactly, yeah.
It identifies you as an out group and then makes it easy for you to be deplatformed. And so they don't even have to think.
Try to bully people into deplatforming, scaring them, like how you said, Endeavor. The whole Democrats are the real racist thing. Don't even bother to give a crap what they say. That's always been my mentality.
Well, yes, but here we're pointing out sort of there's a converse to that coin, right? The converse is to make yourself such an easy target that you effectively have effectively removed yourself from polite company because it's just so easy to deplatform you.
We got a question from Ghost of Buckley. What do I think of neo-scholastic philosophy? I don't know enough about it. Sorry, I can't really answer that. If any of you guys know anything about it, you can give your opinions.
Well, I don't know exactly what Buckley is talking about when he says neo-scholasticism. I know Buckley was talking a lot about the sort of medieval debate techniques, which I think was about a scholastic type argument, which focused on being able to repeat your opponent's arguments to your opponent's satisfaction.
Yeah.
Which I think that's a very admirable. That would save ourselves a lot of. That would save us people a lot of wasted effort for sure.
Yeah. So we got another question. It's why are American Catholics so liberal? I'd say and I guess you guys could probably answer. I'm not American, and I'm technically not Catholic either. I'm actually Baptist, but I think the reason that they're so liberal is because they're Catholic in name only. So I think that they're Catholic because, I don't know, they're Italian or they're Irish or something, and it's just kind of like what they said, kind of what they say, because their parents were. They really just like end up saying that I'm Catholic, but they really don't believe in any of it. So they're Catholic in name only.
Well, it's a very, very long history to why that happened. Traditionally, Catholics were originally Democrats because the Democrats were the party that left people alone, and because Catholics were fairly persecuted and they had their own social structures. They didn't really need a public school system because they had their own Catholic schools and so on and so forth. So they typically voted Democrat. In fact, there was a whole article on basically there were the liturgical Christians and the more the pietist Christians, and the liturgical ones are more the Catholics, the Lutherans. They tended to be more Democrat because they kind of let people alone, and because these liturgical church groups actually had more of the social structures intact, as opposed to the pietists who were more Republican, because that was back in the days of, like shortly after the Civil War, and they were the ones that enacted prohibition. They kind of want to establish morality throughout the country. And so classically, the Catholics were members of the Democratic Party. And then also just because they didn't have as much wealth as other people of the country, and because they were in a lot of cities, they were a lot of the working class. And so therefore, they kind of advocated for policies that assisted the working class. Nowadays, I kind of feel like I know within my relatives, so I'm Catholic, my relatives, they are largely Democrat, and it's largely because it's carryover from that time. So it's kind of like the Democrat Party almost bought their loyalty. And so that's kind of what has really caused them to really swing to the Democrats. Even now, I think even now in the U.S. Senate or Congress or what have you, there are actually more Republican Catholics than Democrat candidates at the moment. So it is switching, but it's just due to that history, because people traditionally vote for the party which their family votes for. And that's the large reason for why they swing more liberal nowadays. It's just that historicity.
I thought Pope Francis has something to do with being a symptom towards that.
I guess kind of, but
My apologies for saying something that awkward.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I know. I think Intermezzo answered that question. I'm actually Baptist, but I am considering either converting to either Catholicism or Eastern Orthodoxy. I haven't decided yet. It's something I do have to look into. Because I was actually an atheist until I was 19, but I converted to I converted to Christianity when I was 19 because and I converted through it was a Protestant group that introduced me to it, so that's why I became a Baptist. But it is something I'm looking into into the future. Okay, so yeah, if there's any more questions, guys, there's one on Nick Fuentes. Do any of you guys like Nick Fuentes?
I don't know who that is. Can anyone?
He was on. He was on Andy Worski's live a few times. He's,
I think Nick is very temperamentally different than me, but he might be necessary.
Yeah.
In a reactionary ecosystem, even though the style, the substance of his spiel is so antithetical to what I'm trying to do that it's hard for me to sort of say I like.
You're breaking up a little.
Yeah.
Am I? Okay, hold on. Give me a second.
Yeah.
Okay. Do I think that the Pope is a Latin socialist? Probably, yeah.
Yeah, he's a socialist.
I'm not gonna lie, he probably is.
But I guess I could answer that Nick Fuentes question. So I don't know the man that well, but I just get. So maybe it's just like when I listen to him, I don't get the right vibes. I kind of get like a used car salesman vibes. But that's just from his personality, I think, and I think I'm. That's just kind of the feeling I get when I hear him.
Hello, Newt. Is this better?
You're still kind of breaking up a bit.
All right, maybe I'll come back in.
The Southern American church is infected with Marxists. I guess so. I mean, I don't know.
They try to infect everything.
He meant South American, not Southern American.
Oh no, I was reading a comment from the chat that said that. So yeah, if there's any more questions, guys, just go on and ask. We'll probably go on for a couple more minutes. I'm not gonna make this a very long stream, but
do you think, like I said with the question with Ayn Rand, do you think she could make a good topic for a video, or just like objectivism in general, and like how it's always an interesting topic to me, just like how people who have this materialistic view set, like once they see it all collapse, they just try to find another materialistic view set that really doesn't fix the problem.
Who making a video on Ayn Rand?
Yeah, or just the philosophy of objectivism in general, because it's just kind of like the less crappy version of Marxism.
I kind of agree with that it is the less crappy version of Marxism.
It's the one that recognizes the economy, but just doesn't care much about culture.
Hopefully, this is better.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
what I would say.
Okay.
Yeah, what I would say to that is that I'm probably not going to make a entire video on objectivism. I have talked a lot about materialism, and I'm talking a bit more about it in my upcoming video. But yeah, I think I don't know. I think Ayn Rand is just stupid, to be quite fair.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So actually, what's interesting? So I'm going to have a stream tomorrow on the Harvard address by Alexander Solzhenitsyn.
Okay.
And he actually brings up that materialism almost inevitably leads to the left. And so,
Go ahead.
So an actual quote that he actually says in his addresses: "As humanism in its development becomes more and more materialistic, it made itself increasingly accessible to speculation and manipulation by socialism, and then by the communism, and then by communism, so that Karl Marx was able to say that communism is naturalized humanism."
Yeah. I actually talked about that in my last video, that materialism is a force that definitely drives that definitely plays into the left's narrative. I talked about that in my previous video. Question we got is, how do we convince the youth to be less decadent? I think that'll actually just come naturally, because I think that economically, I think they're probably not going to have the situation they have right now forever. And I also would say though that
I might disagree with that, but go ahead.
Okay. What I would also say is that I think you can convince them to be less decadent by offering them something immaterial of value, because I find that a lot of them, I mean, because I'm 23, so I guess I'm pretty young myself. I find that a lot of them are depressed in their in decadence. So a lot of them are really depressed with this nihilistic vision of the world. I think that if you're offering them something bigger of value, like say religion or I don't know, nationalism or just any kind of like um, bigger cause to fight for, it I think it convinces them. It'll convince them to give up some of that kind of consumerist lifestyle. But anyway, I'll let you guys answer that.
For young people, I mean, I'm a young guy myself, and I know still a lot of people are depressed and all that. And I'm trying to think of it. You guys have seen Red Letter Media. Did you ever see that parody of like nerd? I think it was Nerd Talk is what it was called.
Yeah,
like,
I made fun of that in my notes.
Yes, yeah. It was like,
I referenced it in my series thing.
Yeah, Nerd Box and Geek Crate, where it's just like they just get a bunch of junk and it just like temporarily like tricks them into thinking that they're all happy and all that. And I think one important thing is the family. Like a lot of people have just shown no value to the family, and it's also, and that I think above all else has shown like massive problems.
Well, there's a problem with that, and that is that if you're talking about young men in their early 20s, almost none of them are going to have families in that sense, right? They're going to have come from a family. But I'm sorry, but there's not going to be a 23-year-old. Early 20s, almost none of them are going to have families in that sense, right?
Oh,
they're going to have come from a family.
I think we're getting feedback. Okay.
No, I think that's just me playing the thing to make sure I'm actually on the stream.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. But young men aren't going to have. So I guess first, fundamentally, I disagree that decadence. I mean, if we're in a civilizational cycle, then indeed decadence is driven by economic growth. But economic growth qua economic growth doesn't necessarily mean decadence. The late Roman Empire had a certain amount of decadence to it, and the early Christian empires did not. But the early Christian empires had more wealth than the late Roman Empire did, just in absolute terms. So it's not such a one-to-one correspondence. So I think what the second response that Endeavor gave was what I would say is that you definitely need to have something else that inspires people to turn away from decadent lifestyles. It's not just wealth. And we don't need to go back to the Middle Ages to rediscover non-decadent lifestyles that might not even be possible with the level of technology we have. And I don't think that the history of humanity shows that increase of wealth makes it impossible to resist decadence. I think it's slightly more complicated than that. And I think the difficulty with families is that, again, this is the thought I kind of got interrupted with, was that young men in their early 20s, what does a family mean to them? It's like their parents and their grandparents, but you're not clinging to that, right? And you don't have a family yet. And furthermore, it's really, really hard to to actually get married as a young man before you're at least in your late 20s these days, because you're just not economically established till then.
Right.
And furthermore, the current cultural environment does not encourage women to marry men who aren't economically established, because the probability that men will get economically established has become low. To put it bluntly.
And again, I probably come from like an entirely different like a lot of people who I grew up with in high school, like I've been showing their Facebooks, and like already like they're not much older than I am. I'm like 21, and they're already like, some of them already have like their first kid, all that. So
okay. Well, I mean, if you have a family, and I think that kind of,
I think it's more like, I think maybe not so much family, but more just hope for the future. Hope for something that's beyond their years.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the better term.
Yeah. Well, what I'll say is that you're going to need something to actually convince them to have one in the first place, because they're not going to be able to derive value from a family they don't have, and that they're not even motivated to having. That's why I think some kind of inspiration is what's going to inspiration.
I think we should probably
that needs to come first.
change that from family to like hope to the future and all that.
So I got a question. What is your position on human rights? Do you think they derive from moral obligations, or do you think they don't exist? I tend to think they don't exist, but I'd say, it's difficult to say. I mean, I think they're being expanded to the extent that they're just ridiculous. I really just think you should have there should just be a moral framework for civilization, and it'd be derived from that. I don't think that there's
So in my opinion, I kind of view so human rights, I just believe, are divine commands, just without the God. So they're really, and so that's essentially how I kind of view them, and that is kind of like where it makes sense, where we're getting more and more and more like of these quote rights all the time. It's because you don't have essentially a standard to which these rights come from. So it's kind of like in money, you know, if you don't have a gold standard or some standard to kind of keep the money in check, then it inevitably will inflate to some degree. Right. Likewise, when you don't have a deity to kind of be the backing for these divine commands, the divine commands will simply multiply to the point where they're essentially worthless. And that's kind of what we're experiencing in our society.
See, I have a different way of viewing this, and I've talked about this a few times. I think the Enlightenment has caused us to conflate several concepts that are fundamentally different. The first one, I think, is human dignity, which I think it was Intermezzo who said it was a divine commandment.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that is what we call human dignity. Mm-hmm. But when I think we talk about rights, I think what rights are is a vow that our leaders make to us, either to us in the current generation or to us in perpetuity, like throughout the generations. I think those are specific promises. And for instance, I'll give you an example of something that I think is part of human dignity, but is not a right in the sense that we would mean it classically. Having a father, right? Part of human dignity is to essentially have your parents raise you, right? It's sort of owed to children, and if we can possibly provide it to them, we should. But at the same time, the state can't very well promise that every child will be raised by his father. It can be aspirational, but not something that can be promised. And I think that in a lot of ways, you know, post our religious phase of the West, I think there's been a lot of magical thinking that's sort of been injected into the concept of the right in both directions, because it seems to be impossible to assert. I mean, it seems to be impossible to assert human dignity with a purely negative conception of rights, but impossible to ground rights as something that can be guaranteed with anything more than a negative characterization of rights. And because of that, we're just really, really confused about what we mean when we say right or dignity or whatever.
Yeah. I would argue that modern rights have been expanded to the state to the point that they make civilizations unstable.
Yeah, well,
but I think any reactionary would probably agree with that.
Rights, they are things they want to have. Rights to me are stuff that you essentially. Rights to me are what you need for a civilization to grow and prosper. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and all that. But like all these other things that people want, they're not things to help make anything grow. They're just a bunch of it mostly just amounts to I want this because I'm me and I deserve it.
But you miss something here, right? Because this sort of gets to the fundamental confusion that you see on both sides. We need more than life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness to make civilization thrive. We need a lot more than that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Lockean negative rights do not give us either Lockean negative rights are not sufficient to secure human dignity, and they're not sufficient to get a thriving civilization. They're nice to have. They're great. They're awesome. But they're not in themselves sufficient.
They are basic. It is a simplified view. They might
not even be so basic, right? they might be in some sense superfluous, because family formation is needed before any society will ever assert some kind of concept of lucky and negative rights. Just the history of the human race will demonstrate that.
Yeah. So I got another really great question. Which aspect of modernism do you hate the most? So I don't know whether you mean modernism as in like the art form or modernism as in modernity. What I'll say, I guess what I hate the most about modernity is that it makes civilization seems to have no purpose. So, for example, I read all these amazing stories of the British Empire, and how my ancestors left Britain and arrived in Canada, and how they had the sense that they were part of the greatest empire to ever grace the earth, and that there was a purpose to society. They were building something. That it was something of value beyond what the material wealth they could derive from it. And I find in modern society, it's all that seems to matter really is what's our GDP, what's our quality of life index rating, what's our education. What I hate about modernity the most is that civilization has become pointless. That's my point. That's what I hate the most. I'll let you guys answer that though.
It more or less reduced civilization to material meanings instead of.
So any of you other guys want to answer that? What do you hate the most about modernity?
I mean, what I hate most about modernity is that it almost worships pleasure, and that it basically tries to make it so that pleasure is the only sort of thing that we should sort of thrive for. So instead of like striving for something like an achievement to improve ourselves, we just sort of strive for like some form of pleasure we can have.
I think the biggest thing that I dislike about it is not only that it isolates us from our true purpose, like it essentially removes the notion of a true purpose, but I also hate the fact that it's essentially unsustainable. And perhaps maybe also, like, I kind of understand this because I work with a lot of people who are actually ruined by the problems with modernity, socially as well as economically. I kind of feel like it ruins a lot of people's lives, specifically the people who really need social customs in order to really maintain their lives.
Yeah, I think you've pretty much summed up my thoughts as well.
Yeah. It's easy to say, oh, marriage isn't worthwhile if you're in the upper middle class, or if you're an elite person, or if you have a lot of money, or if you have a lot of friends who are wealthy, or if you have some social status. It's a whole nother thing to say that marriage is worthless for essentially a person who lives in poverty and really needs that social support, because otherwise that person doesn't have any.
Right.
Yeah. And I would also say that one thing I really just find depressing in modernity is that we seem unable to really produce anything of value anymore, because I had made this short video of comparing architecture in Toronto, which the point of the video is that the people that built a building 150 years ago, they had a vision of what they were building. They felt like they were building something that's bigger than the building itself. It wasn't just meant to be rented out by some company.
Right.
It was meant to look beautiful, to be a part of a city that's part of a nation, that's part of an empire, and and we don't have that. We can't even conceive of that stuff anymore.
I loved that video, by the way. That one just it's like you look at how most of the cities and all that are designed today, and it is so boring. Like every aspect of it, it's all just like a lot of people design it as these ugly, just looking skyscrapers and all that. They're basically just bricks. Yeah. They're ugly bricks around long stretches of road.
They're either just ugly, almost like a puke red brick, or it's just like a stainless steel building that just looks gray and unappealing.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'd say that. I mean, I think that's just the biggest symbol of what's wrong with modernity. To me, it's architecture. And I've talked about this a lot in my videos. It's really just that the people that built these didn't see themselves as building something that was part of something bigger. And I mean, and that, I mean, it just goes to show it's what people say is that if something built only for utility will be useless, and I think that's very much true.
Yeah.
Here's another thing I would like to point out.
Yep.
Well, actually, two things. One that's short, and the other is very long.
Okay, go ahead.
The first one, the short one, Porch Pals, even though I actually disagree with that man because he is an alt-righter, made a video regarding about over a century ago when railroad trolleys were still in use in downtown areas. The architects used to build those train stations rather beautifully and are very durable. And these days, the bus stations are built, well, still last very long, but aren't as beautiful as those obsolete trolley stations.
Yeah, exactly. If you look at like Grand Central Station in New York or station in the city I'm in,
In fact, there's a glimpse of that modern architecture with the big bus station within my downtown area, which is made of stainless steel and that white tarp above, which is unlike the New York City Grand Central Station.
so I got a question. Do I know who Todd Lewis is? Yeah, I know who Todd Lewis is. I actually did a stream with him. I mirrored it on my channel if you'd like to check that out. What are your opinions on meritocracy? I think that it's I would disagree with it in the sense that I don't think that you should have the idea that, well, we should just bring in who's the best for this job from anywhere in the world, because the problem is that you need to again, that just plays into globalism. Like, you need to have the idea that your people come first, and I don't think that the idea that we just need to import. I mean, it's certainly better than importing people that can't that can't get any job. But it's like at the same time, I don't think that just like hunting down the best people in the world, because I think in a lot of countries you have people that are educated and looking for these positions. So I'd say,
in addition to that, a lot of people don't like start off being the best. A lot of them become the best through experience.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd say I don't have very many opinions on it. I'd say the idea of meritocracy. I'd just say that
I just think that meritocracy is just fundamentally untrue.
Yeah, I'd say it is.
Because it assumes that we all have a identical starting position, which we don't. And just like in my profession in medicine, about of all physicians who are trained in medical school, about 20% have a parent who's a physician. And when you have a parent who's a physician, that kind of gives you an unfair advantage over other people. And so, is it really meritocratic? I don't really know. You're just kind of trained differently from a different age, and so it just based upon where you live, based upon who your parents are, based upon all these other factors, that's gonna, like, no matter what, you can't make a system that removes all of those factors, and so therefore there is no possibility of a meritocracy, or you can make things as meritocratic as you can try, but it's never ever going to be a true meritocracy.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I just think it's a false premise. I just don't see it ever really being an idea that really makes sense, to be honest. I don't know. So what about meritocracy within a group with strong limits on immigration? Same thing. I think I would agree with Intermezzo that it kind of just seems to be a concept that I don't know. I just think that people are different. I would just say that much. So yeah, if there's any more questions, I'll probably end this shortly because didn't want to make this one too long. But yeah, any more questions from the chat, or if any of you guys would like to ask anything, go ahead.
I was watching a video, rewatching a video from Black Pigeon Speaks talking about like it was called Atheism Isn't Edgy Anymore, It's Dying Out, like everywhere. And what was funny was just like the response from the people got. It was just this giant. It was basically just a bunch of people like trying to reassure themselves that they were right without actually, you know, combating the evidence.
Well, I mean, you have to understand that with people like T.J. Kirk and like these new atheism types, is that they need to they have an identity that's based on hating religion, meaning that they need to lash out every time they see something they don't like, because they justify that identity by lashing out at these things. So yeah, it's anytime you make a video like that,
teenagers that want to pretend to be adults, whose mentality of all you need to be as an adult is like your own house, car, and you make your own money, which there is far much more to being an adult than just like a bunch of stupid materialistic crap.
Yeah, and the fedoras online, sir.
Yeah,
threshold.
They're funny. They're easy to make fun of, and they have no.
Yeah.
Well, did you watch that video response to Black Pigeon Speaks from the Battening?
No.
Battening is an idiot.
Well, never even heard of him. The Battening?
Yeah, he's rather he's a content creator and an anti-SJW, and he made a response video to that Black Pigeon Speaks video, and he claims that BPS kept strawmanning in that video because it's possible to separate TJ Kirk from atheism in general.
Well, okay, the point that Black Pigeon Speaks was trying to make is that it's not. I mean, it's just, really just identifying as atheist. It's just a waste of time at this point. That shtick had its day. I think it's done with, and I don't really.
Yeah, especially since have you seen there was a debate between Matt Dillahunty and Inspiring Philosophy, and it was embarrassing. I felt embarrassed for Dillahunty, the guy from the Atheist Experience. He just was. It was characterized by Inspiring Philosophy actually bringing sociological evidence showing how religion positively impacts people, and him just going, well, it might not be true. Something logical. Like, this whole thing is getting really sad, I think. I was also listening very briefly the other day to T.J. Kirk's take on against Jordan Peterson. He's like writing a book or something and reading the chapters. And it's just a really depressing philosophy that leads nowhere. It's the same kind of existentialism we've gotten for the last 100 years that really is increasingly empty. It's a philosophy of atomization, and people don't want atomization. They want thick communities. They want people that they can call allies. They want people that they can call friends.
Well, the thing with Jordan Peterson and TJ Kirk is Jordan Peterson pretty much advises people to actually, improve themselves and all that. And the idea with but TJ, if he looked at himself in the mirror and took an honest look at who he is and where he's going, he would want to change, but I don't think he wants to actually say, I'm a disgusting individual who has no real hope anymore.
Yeah,
I don't think anyone doesn't
so
have
instead
hope.
of like actually wanting to improve himself, he just wants to justify to himself that, hey, this is just normalcy.
Yeah, I think he once advocated for universal health care, and that's not going to fly if we have people like him.
I don't
about universal health care. It's like, I spend all my 20s and 30s drinking, now my liver is destroyed. Buy me a new liver.
I think look at his universal health care if he goes to the zoo.
I don't want to plunge this thing into a larger extended conversation, but I think Jordan Peterson is the right direction, but he hasn't really. He's not the end point, and a lot of people treat him like an end point. I think that the next thing, because Jordan Peterson, it gets you to sort of a non-nihilistic meritocracy, But again, we end up in this world where the end all be all is the job that makes a lot of money, and for all his other faults, TJ Kirk makes a lot of money. And, he has in some sense beat a meritocracy in some degree, but at the same time we feel that the life he lives is somehow incredibly empty. Hard to necessarily come from that with just Jordan Peterson. I mean, if you're left a total mess, even to the point where you can't make any money, then perhaps Jordan Peterson is a place to start. But I think the next step is to really come up with a collective sense of meaning and community. And I think that requires going beyond Peterson, because I don't think Peterson really, I don't think he's skeptical enough of a lot of the baby boomer generation aphorisms to really think in the radical directions we might need in the next 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
And so,
go
go ahead. Sorry. So I see him as a good jumping off point, but it's still, it's not sufficient to just stop there. Right.
Yeah. I would say I pretty much agree with that. Another question I got, what is my opinion on the Filioque controversy? I don't know what that is. Do any of you guys know what that is?
Yes, that is, so in the Nicene Creed, we say that the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son. And so in the Orthodox, this is the whole controversy, is that the Orthodox believes that was an illegitimate component to it, that it should only be that the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father and that part from the Son isn't really, or it should be part of the Nicene Creed. And it's essentially, I don't really think it's the biggest deal in the world. I know at the second council of, the second Lateran Council, or the second Council of Leon, or something like that. In essence, actually, all the Greek bishops actually agreed with the Roman Catholic bishops that it could be added to the Nicene Creed. But then when they returned home, the emperor of the Byzantine Empire at the time actually stated, "Oh no, you can't, that's wrong. And, we need to maintain our independence from the Church of Rome." And
okay.
I think that they're, obviously I'm speaking from a Roman Catholic perspective, but an Orthodox person will give them their perspective, but that's kind of the controversy. So it's kind of basically, how the Orthodox kind of rationalize why they should maintain their independence of Rome.
Okay, a few more questions. Are abortion bombings justified? No. No need to expand on that. Any new atheist debate between you guys looking forward to? New atheists don't agree to debates, so no. Endeavor, what's your opinion on Warski Live? I talked about this a bit earlier in the stream. I think it's destructive, to be honest. I mean, I haven't seen very much anything really positive for us coming out of it. I mean, hey, if they invite me on, I'd go on, but I don't think that just bringing people on to scream at each other is really gonna solve any of this at this point, to be honest.
Yeah,
I think kind of like. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, just listening to Distributist and his interactions with the Warski Live and how it closed so many opportunities for him, I think it's just toxic. I would avoid it, stay clear of it.
Well, I don't know. It did definitely nuke some opportunities for me, but I don't think it should have. Right? I don't think that if we start sort of more the problem, I should say, to just clarify. I was reaching out to sort of more neoconservative and neoconservative and classically conservative people, and when they saw that I was on the Warskis, a lot of those doors shut. I think that's important to take into consideration practically, but we have to remind ourselves that the problem with that model is not the Warskis, as toxic as the Warskis are, because we can't start playing cooties games with them. We can't justify cooties games. By cooties, I mean you touch that person, therefore you are imbued by all their problems, right? If you do that, YouTube will become functionally unusable for you as a medium of exchanging ideas. So we can't do that, right? And at the same time, the approach that's taken by the Warskis does, in some sense, discredit the ideas community on YouTube and makes it seem more like Jerry Springer and less like an alternative to something like NPR or mainstream news. And that's a problem. And it's even to the intellectual side. The alt-hype interaction with David Sherratt was really indicative of this, right? I mean, like, David Sherratt has thrown some low blows, but I mean, the way to do that is to be the bigger man, not to like bring him on the show and then call him David Shitrat. You know, I mean that vindicates the low blows that he threw to begin with, and it turns the whole. I mean, David Sherratt kind of on the other end, he kind of wants to make YouTube. David Sherratt wants to turn YouTube conversations into like diss tracks. You know, he essentially that's David Sherratt doesn't understand that insulting someone isn't the same thing as proving them wrong or demonstrating they're wrong or whatever. But the difficulty is that the alt hype who does know that you have to actually demonstrate things are wrong before you insult somebody essentially vindicated the Sherratt's approach, and so did Andy Worski by just insulting him. So this is sort of it's hard, right? We have to focus on the fact that internet blood sports are going to happen. We cannot say that because internet that people who try to use internet blood sports to discredit other thinkers on YouTube. We have to vehemently disagree with that and disagree with that as a whole. But I think you have to simultaneously acknowledge that it has a poisonous effect while still maintaining that it shouldn't have a poisonous effect, right? If that makes any sense.
I mean, I've liked a few of them, but yeah, I don't know. I think at this point it's not really. It's doing more damage than positives, to be honest. So I got another question. When are you going to pledge your loyalty to the eternal horseshoe? Is that referring to horseshoe theory?
Yes.
Okay. Horseshoe theory is horse shit. Because what the horseshoe theory is, it's a way of just pointing at your opponents and just saying, it's a way of putting yourself on a moral high ground and pointing at your opponents and saying how horrible they are.
The only use of the moral high ground is to climb on top of it and then jump off of it into the pit. Exactly.
There could be a way to use it properly. You know, I think that it is, you know, in some sense, if you let me be the contrarian I like being here, like the horseshoe theory as it's used by like Shoe on Head and Armored Skeptic is bullshit.
And
yeah, and all the other group, right? That's sort of a thought-terminating cliche. It is useful in the fact that I think it is pertinent to point out that the new right and the new left have a lot of elements in common. I think that is an important thing to understand, even if we're not going to go.
The new left is though.
The new left being the sort of Antifa, like revolutionary types.
But Braving Ruin actually made a video about that he basically said that the Antifa types are not really new left, but really just they're really just in communion with the mainstream left.
Oh yeah, they're in communion with the mainstream left in the way that the new right and the old right just aren't. And that's owing to the fact that the progressives still have a functioning political coalition in the country and the right wing does not. But I think that when you contrast the new left's attitudes towards a lot of things, you'll see that there's a huge distinction. There's a huge difference between them and the boomer leftism. A huge difference.
Well, I just think that the new left is further down the rabbit hole.
Sure. Yeah. And, again, not to throw a bomb that will cause us to immediately digress, but I thought one of the more interesting points today was Kanye's turn to the right, which, this is essentially going to. This is not the individual instance. This is going to create a fracture on the progressive coalition. But what you're going to start seeing is you're going to see explicitly nationalist, explicitly authoritarian elements emerge from the new left. And they're going to cause many hairline cracks inside the framework of the progressive coalition.
I agree with that. Because someone like, say, Black Lives Matter, I would say that they're black nationalists. I would not say that they're progressive.
Even the Hotep, like the Hotep movement, they're radical black nationalists. So are they left or are they right? What does it even make a difference? It doesn't. It's not sensical, right? And I would want to make sure that if we're going to bash horseshoe theory, we bash the moral grandstanding that terminates careful analysis of thought, and not just pointing out that some radical movements have interesting similarities to radical left movements. That radical right-left movements have interesting similarities.
Yeah, but I just think that you shouldn't think of it as as the shape of a horseshoe, because I think that certain different movements have different might have certain elements in similar, but that doesn't necessarily mean they have to be on the extremes to have that those elements, because then you would pretty much have to admit that you are on that extreme, which, I mean, of course, as per present day politics, of course I am I am on the dissident right, but I don't think radicals. You can really look at it. Sorry?
The radicals.
Oh, I know that, but what I'm saying is that I don't think that the new right or the new left necessarily have to be extremists to have things in common. So that's what I'd argue against horseshoe.
Another bullcrap concept from the left is the fishhook theory, in which they lump in the far right, any other right, the alt-right, with the centrist to form the very unenlightened thing, while the far leftists themselves considers themselves as the centrists. It's still bullcrap. The fishhook theory. Just look it up.
There's another one. Yeah. What is it?
Pardon me?
Did you say something?
No, that's the most contrived and self-serving theory I've heard in a long time.
Hey, I got a new. Hey, I have an idea for a new theory they can use. Hey, please don't criticize me because my stupid ideas had terrible consequences theory. This theory says that when my terrible ideas have bad consequences, you can't blame me for it.
Yeah. The other version of that, I'd say the right's version of that fishhook theory would be the Dinesh D'Souza political spectrum.
Yeah,
that thing is terrifyingly dumb.
I talked about that in my PragerU video. It's that everyone who is not a 21st century Republican is a evil Nazi fascist socialist commie, including like Louis XIV.
It was hysterical when they called Imperial Germany fascist. That literally requires so many bounces in logic. It's not even funny.
Yeah. And not to mention that Imperial Germany ceased to exist before fascism was even formulated. Yeah. Okay. What I'll say to all this though is that you can't look at the political landscape in a way that's just so self-congratulatory. You need to actually, the way you look at it, you need to actually learn something from it. Because with people like Dinesh D'Souza, Armored Skeptic, or like, I guess, these fishhook people on the left, they're looking at it in a way that it suggests I'm right about everything and everyone else is wrong, and it just serves as being it's just self-congratulatory. It doesn't actually tell you anything you actually need to know about the real political landscape. So I'd say that's what I would say about all these theories.
By the way, I misspoke about the fishhook theory. It turns out the closer they are to the centrist, the more similar the far right are. That's what I meant.
Yeah. Well, I think Chroma's pretzel theory is the best theory.
Okay.
So
anyway, I think I'm gonna probably end it here. Current thoughts on the what are your thoughts on the current era of cultural stagnation? Well, I think that's what my channel is all about. So thanks for listening to everyone who listened. Thank you so much for the 500 subs. It's really exciting to be part of this and to be making content that people enjoy, and let's see if we can get the 1,000 sometime this summer, maybe. I don't know, but yeah, thank you for listening. Stay tuned. There's a lot more to come from me. Thank you for listening. Till next time, Endeavor.